Silence pressed in closer. Henry swallowed. "My father wanted us to leave," he said. "Years ago. He begged me." Martha stared at him as if she hadn't heard correctly. "Leave?" Henry nodded. "He said Ashwood House wasn't a home. He said it was an anchor." Daniel scoffed. "To what? Superstition?" Henry's eyes flicked toward the corner of the ceiling where shadow gathered. "To the past," he said. Clara whispered, "What happened here?" Henry's hands trembled. He gripped the edge of the table. "There's a reason," he said. "We never invite anyone for New Year's Eve." Martha's lips parted, then closed. She looked suddenly ill. Daniel frowned. "That's not true." Henry met his son's eyes. "Yes, it is. Think." Daniel tried, and failed, to remember a New Year's Eve guest. Clara's face went pale. "We always stayed in." Henry nodded slowly. "Because on the last day of the year," he said, "this house remembers." The candles flickered, all at once, like a breath inhaled. Thomas's voice trembled. "Remembers what?" Henry's throat tightened. "The first Ashwood," he said, "made a bargain." Daniel slammed his hand down. "Enough! Bargains! This is—" Henry's voice rose, not loud but sharp. "Listen!" The word cut Daniel off. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the house creaked. But beneath it all, there was another sound now, a faint tapping from upstairs. Slow, deliberate, like footsteps. Everyone froze. Daniel turned his head slightly, listening. The footsteps continued, one step a pause, another step, crossing the upper floor. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Is someone up there?" "That's impossible," Daniel said quickly, too quickly. "We're all here." Evelyn's voice was barely audible. "We took away the 7th place." Henry stood, chair scraping the floor. The sound was too loud in the room. It felt like shouting. "I checked the doors," he said. "We're locked in." The footsteps moved toward the top of the staircase. Thomas slid off his chair instinctively, backing toward Evelyn. Martha stood too, hands trembling. Daniel grabbed the carving knife, more for pride than belief, and held it awkwardly at his side. Mrs. O'Dwyer crossed herself, whispering a prayer that sounded older than the house. The footsteps stopped, a long pause. Then slowly they began descending. The family could not see the stairs from the dining room, but they heard every creak, every groan of wood bending under a weight that should not exist. Step, 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 closer. Henry's breath came out white. Clara clutched the edge of the table. Thomas whispered, "Father." Henry didn't answer, because the air in the room had changed again. It wasn't cold now, it was charged, like the moment before lightning. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. And then, nothing. Silence. So deep it felt like water closing over their heads. The dining room door was open. The hallway beyond was dim. No movement, no figure, but the candle flames leaned toward the doorway as if drawn. And then the voice came. Not out loud. Inside every skull at once, bypassing ears, bypassing choice. "The year ends. The account opens," Clara screamed. Short, sharp, helpless. Martha covered her mouth, shaking. Daniel raised the knife, voice breaking. "Who's there?" The voice answered, not with words, but with sensation, like a memory being forced into the mind. Images flashed behind Henry's eyes, a ledger book stained by water, a signature, an iron key, a man crying at a table, a woman with bruised wrists, a sealed door below the house. Henry staggered as if struck. Evelyn grabbed his arm. "Father," she whispered urgently, "what did you do?" Henry's eyes were wide and wet. "Not me," he said. "Not me, but our name." The voice returned, colder. "Debt does not die, it changes hands." The candle flames flared, every window rattled, and then the voice delivered the sentence that turned the meal into a funeral. "Before midnight, The house will be balanced. Balanced, like books, like accounts, like lives measured against lives. The presence withdrew, not leaving, just stepping back, waiting. And when it did, the ticking of the hallway clock seemed louder than the storm, because now the family heard time as a threat. Henry Ashwood stood at the head of the table, shaking, staring at the doorway as if it had become a mouth. "We have to leave," Martha whispered. Daniel shook his head. "We can't. The storm..." Evelyn's voice was calm in a way that terrified them all. "We can't leave," she said, "because this isn't the kind of night you walk away from." Thomas began to cry silently, staring at the candles. And Henry finally understood why he'd been dreaming of a key. Because somewhere in this house, beneath the floorboards, behind a locked door no one talked about, there was something the Ashwoods had buried, and the house had decided tonight was the night to unbury it. The moment after the voice vanished was worse than the voice itself. Silence returned, but it wasn't empty. It was occupied by the certainty that something had been promised, and that promises, once acknowledged, demand completion. "We leave. Now." Daniel's voice cut through the paralysis like a blade. He was already moving, grabbing Clara's hand, reaching for Thomas with the other. "We take coats, we take blankets, we go to the cellar, to the carriage, anywhere but here." Henry shook his head slowly. His face had the hollow look of a man who had just read his own obituary. "There is no carriage," he said. "I had it moved yesterday." Martha stared at him. "Moved? Why?" Henry swallowed. "Because my father told me years ago that the worst thing you can do on nights like this is try to flee with what belongs to the house." Daniel scoffed. "This is madness. The house doesn't own us." Evelyn spoke, quiet but certain. "It thinks it does." The hallway clock ticked. 1 second, another. Time was no longer passing. It was approaching. Daniel didn't wait for permission. He stormed into the hallway, boots thudding too loudly against the wood floor. The others followed close behind, lantern light bobbing like a nervous heartbeat. The front door stood exactly where it always had. Thick oak, iron hinges. Familiar. Daniel gripped the handle and pulled. It didn't budge. He pulled harder. Nothing. "Frozen," he muttered, bracing his shoulder against it and pushing with all his weight. The door didn't creak. It didn't flex. It didn't acknowledge him. Henry raised the lantern higher and froze. The lock was gone. Not broken. Gone. In its place was smooth, uninterrupted wood, as if no keyhole had ever existed. Martha gasped. "That's not possible." Evelyn stepped closer, eyes narrowed. "It's not locked," she said. "It's forgotten." Daniel stepped back, breath sharp. "That's impossible." Henry didn't argue because he remembered the dream, the iron key, the lock you could taste. They tried the windows next. Daniel threw open the parlor shutters, only to find glass where glass should not have been. Thicker, clouded. The outside world distorted, bent as if viewed through water. He struck the pane with the butt of the carving knife. The sound was wrong, not a crack, a dull, hollow thud, like striking bone. "No," Clara whispered. "No, no, no." Snow still fell beyond the glass, but it looked distant, unreal, as though it belonged to another version of the night. Martha pressed her palm against the window and recoiled instantly. "It's warm," she said in disbelief. "The glass is warm." Henry's voice was barely more than breath. "Because it's no longer a boundary." The house groaned, not settling, responding. They turned back toward the stairs, and that's when the house changed its mind. The hallway was longer than it had been moments before, not impossibly so, just wrong. Doors that should have been near were suddenly far away. Shadows thickened, stretching across the walls like ink spilled in water. Daniel stopped mid-step. "Did we take a wrong turn?" "No," Evelyn said. She knelt, touching the floor with her fingertips. "The house is moving us," she said calmly, "not physically, conceptually." Martha stared at her daughter. "Evelyn, the voice didn't threaten us," Evelyn continued. "It announced something. That means it needs us aware." Henry looked at her, truly looked, and realized something he hadn't wanted to accept. "You hear it better than we do," he said. Evelyn nodded. "Because I've always listened." They reached the kitchen at last. The air there was colder, sharper. Mrs. O'Dwyer stood by the pantry door, clutching something in her hands. An iron key, old, heavy, dark with age. Martha's voice shook. "Where did you get that?" Mrs. O'Dwyer didn't look at her. "It was always here," she said, "hanging behind the flour sacks. I was told never to touch it." "Told by whom?" Daniel demanded. The old woman swallowed. "Your grandfather's father." Henry's heart sank. He knew this moment had been waiting longer than he had been alive. "That key doesn't open a door," Henry said. Mrs. O'Dwyer nodded slowly. "It opens a remembering." She handed it to Evelyn. The moment Evelyn's fingers closed around the iron, she gasped, not in pain, in recognition. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the taste." Henry flinched. "You've felt it too." Evelyn nodded. "Since I was little, like rust on my tongue, like secrets with edges." Daniel stared at them both. "You're talking like this is normal." Henry met his son's eyes. "Nothing about this family has ever been normal." The cellar stairs were steeper than Henry remembered, narrower. The lantern light struggled against the dark, shadows folding in on themselves like things trying to hide. At the bottom stood a door Henry had never seen, not hidden, ignored, built directly into the stone foundation. No handle, no visible hinges, just a shallow depression in the wood where a lock should be. Evelyn stepped forward, heart pounding, and raised the key. The moment the iron touched the wood, the house shuddered, not violently, like a sigh released after decades of restraint. The key slid into the depression, not mechanically, but willingly. The door didn't open. It exhaled, and then it spoke, not with words, with memory. The cellar vanished. Henry stood in a different room, a counting room. Long table, ledger books, candlelight, men in dark coats. He recognized the face at the head of the table instantly. Silas Ashwood, the first, the founder, the man whose name was carved into every beam of the house. Silas spoke, but his mouth did not move. "The river will take my ships. The winter will ruin my men. I will lose everything." Another presence answered him, not human, not spectral, patient, ancient. Everything must balance. Silas nodded, desperate. "I will give you a year. Every year. I will give you what is due." The presence did not agree. It recorded. Henry felt the truth settle into his bones. The bargain was not for wealth. It was for continuity, for the name to endure, for the house to remain standing. And the payment was not immediate. It was generational. A debt passed forward like an heirloom no one wanted to examine. Henry staggered back into his body, gasping. Martha caught him. Daniel looked sick. Clara wept silently. Thomas clutched Evelyn's arm. Mrs. O'Dwyer crossed herself again and again. "The house isn't haunted," Evelyn said quietly. "It's accounting." The hallway clock chimed. 10 times. 2 hours remained until midnight. Henry looked at his family, at the faces he loved more than anything this house had ever offered. "We don't survive by running," he said. "We survive by settling the account." Daniel clenched his jaw. "How?" Evelyn closed her eyes, still holding the key. "By opening what was sealed," she said, "and by choosing who we are, instead of who the house remembers us as." The lantern flickered. Above them, something shifted. The house had heard them, and it was no longer patient. From deep within the walls came a new sound, not footsteps, scraping, like something being dragged upward from beneath the foundation. The clock ticked. The house leaned inward, and the Ashwoods understood one terrible truth. The bargain was due, and this time the house intended to collect in full. The scraping sound didn't come from a single direction. It came from everywhere at once, from inside the walls, from beneath the floors, from the beams above their heads, like something enormous shifting its weight for the first time in decades. The lantern flickered violently in Henry's hand. Evelyn still held the iron key, her fingers numb, her face pale, not with fear, but with understanding. "It's sorting us," she said. Daniel turned on her sharply. "Sorting us for what?" "For relevance," Evelyn replied. "For usefulness." The scraping grew louder, resolving into something more structured, rhythmic, intentional. Then came the sound of writing, not pen on paper, something harder, something like metal carving into stone. Henry's breath hitched. The ledgers. The family had grown up with them, rows of leather-bound books filling shelves in the study, records of ships, cargo, profits, losses, accounting, always accounting. The house was not angry. It was meticulous. A sudden impact shook the floor above them. Daniel staggered as if struck. He gasped, clutching his chest. "Daniel!" Martha cried, rushing forward. But Daniel was staring, not at his mother, but at the air in front of him. Letters were forming, not written, etched, floating inches from his face like a balance sheet only he could see. Evelyn whispered, "It's showing him his column." Daniel's voice shook. I don't understand." Henry stepped closer. "What do you see?" Daniel swallowed hard. "I see numbers, names, ports." His face twisted in horror. "And beneath them, people." The house responded. The walls pulsed, and suddenly Daniel screamed, not in pain but in shock. "I knew," he cried. "I knew the docks weren't safe. I signed off anyway. I told myself it was progress." Henry felt his knees weaken. Daniel had modernized the company, cut costs, ignored warnings. Men had died. "I didn't kill them," Daniel sobbed. "I didn't push them into the river." "But you counted them," the voice said. This time, it came clearly. Not loud, unavoidable. Daniel collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. The numbers around him rearranged, balanced, then vanished. Daniel slumped forward, alive but hollowed out, like something vital had been removed. Clara screamed his name, but the house had already moved on. The corridor behind them shifted. Where the cellar stairs had been, there was now a narrow hallway leading upward. The walls were lined with shelves, empty shelves, waiting. "Don't move," Henry said instinctively. But the house did not ask permission. It redirected. The floor beneath Clara softened, then tilted. She cried out as the boards slanted beneath her feet, guiding her forward like a conveyor. Henry lunged, grabbing her wrist. The moment he touched her, the floor snapped back into place. Clara collapsed into his arms, shaking. "It's separating us," Martha whispered. "No," Evelyn corrected. "It's categorizing." The lantern light shifted toward Clara, not from Henry's hand, from the walls themselves. A warm glow enveloped her. Clara's breath caught. "I never told anyone," she whispered, tears streaming. "I never told, because I was afraid it would ruin everything." "What?" Martha pleaded. Clara's voice broke. "I knew about Father's illness before anyone else. I found the letters, the doctor's notes. I hid them." Henry stared at her, stunned. "You hid them," he whispered. "I thought if I didn't say it aloud, it wouldn't become real." Clara sobbed. "I wanted one more year where everything felt normal." The house reacted instantly. The warmth vanished. Cold rushed in. The voice returned, not condemning, not forgiving. "Deferred truth accrues interest." Clara collapsed to her knees, gasping as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. Henry held her, weeping openly now. The house was not punishing lies, it was correcting delays. Martha stepped forward before the house could speak again. "Enough," she said. Her voice shook, but she did not retreat. "You don't get to tear them apart," she said to the empty air. "You don't get to decide what makes a life worth living." The lantern flame steadied. For the first time that night, the house hesitated. Evelyn turned slowly to her mother. "You were never part of the bargain," Evelyn said softly. Martha nodded. "I know. And yet you benefited from it," the voice replied. Martha lifted her chin. "Yes, and I accept that." The air grew heavy, but something changed. Not submission, recognition. The house had not expected consent. Evelyn closed her eyes. "I see it now," she said. "The bargain can't create, it can only redistribute." Henry stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It can only take what's already here," she said. "Guilt, silence, delay, it feeds on what we refuse to carry." The scraping sound slowed. The walls stilled. The house wasn't finished, but it was reconsidering. The floor trembled again. A new set of letters formed in the air, this time in front of Henry. He closed his eyes. "I know," he said hoarsely. "I already know." The images came anyway, the iron key, the sealed door, the moment his father begged him to leave, and Henry chose comfort over courage. "I stayed," Henry whispered. "I stayed because this house made me feel important." The voice answered softly. "Then you will decide what importance costs." Henry opened his eyes. 2 hours until midnight had become 1. The clock chimed 11 times, and the house shifted its attention toward the only person who hadn't yet been touched. Evelyn. Evelyn met the darkness without fear. "The key doesn't belong to you," she said. The house paused. For the first time since the night began, it listened. The house did not answer Evelyn right away. It didn't deny her. It didn't challenge her. It adjusted. That was the most frightening part. The scraping inside the walls slowed, then stopped. The air grew still, so suddenly that everyone noticed the absence of sound before they noticed anything else. No wind, no creaking beams, no ticking clock. Even the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. Henry felt the pressure in his chest ease slightly, like a fist loosening just enough to remind him it could tighten again at any moment. Evelyn still held the iron key. Its surface was no longer cold. It was warm, alive with a dull, steady heat that pulsed faintly against her palm. "It's listening now," she said quietly. Daniel pushed himself up from the floor, pale and shaken. "Listening doesn't mean it cares." "No," Evelyn replied, "but it means it needs something." The voice returned, not from everywhere this time, but from a single point. The dining room. The family followed it instinctively, moving through corridors that no longer shifted, past walls that had decided, at least for now, to remain walls. When they entered the dining room, they stopped short. The table was no longer set for dinner. It was set like a ledger. The plates were gone. In their place lay thick, yellowed pages, each one covered in writing. Names, dates, transactions, decisions. Every generation, every compromise. Every time the Ashwood family had chosen survival over accountability. Henry stepped closer, his hands trembling. "This isn't judgment," the voice said. "This is balance." Martha swallowed. "You're not a curse." "No," the voice replied. "I am a mechanism." Evelyn nodded slowly. "A system." "Yes," Henry forced himself to speak. "Silas Ashwood made the bargain." "He initiated the process," the voice corrected, "but he did not understand it." Daniel clenched his fists. "Then explain it." The pages on the table turned by themselves. Each flip sounded like a breath. Silas Ashwood did not bargain for wealth, the voice said. He bargained for continuity, for the name to survive disaster, for the house to endure. Clara whispered, "At any cost." "At an agreed cost," the voice said calmly. "Deferred payment." Evelyn closed her eyes, seeing it clearly now. Every generation paid, but never all at once. The debt was spread thin, manageable. "Until now," Martha said. "Yes." The final page on the table lay blank, waiting. Henry felt his throat tighten. "Why tonight?" The voice answered without hesitation. "Because this generation attempted to modernize the system." Daniel stiffened. "You turned lives into numbers," the voice continued. "You accelerated growth, you increased extraction." Daniel's voice cracked. "I thought efficiency was progress." "Progress without responsibility creates imbalance," the voice replied. Evelyn stepped forward. "So the house recalibrates?" "Yes." Henry stared at the blank page. "And what fills it?" The room grew colder, not threateningly but conclusively. A final settlement. Evelyn's grip tightened on the key. "You can't choose," she said. "You can only enforce." The voice paused. That pause told her everything. "You need us to decide," she continued, "because without consent the system collapses." The lantern flames flickered, not in fear, but in instability. Martha stepped forward, eyes steady. "What happens if we refuse?" The voice answered honestly. "The debt remains unresolved. The house will continue to rebalance through future generations with increasing severity." Henry felt sick. "And if we accept?" "The Ashwood name ends tonight." Silence. Clara let out a broken sob. Daniel stared at the floor. Thomas whispered, "Ends how?" Evelyn answered before the voice could. "Not death," she said. "Erasure." The pages on the table rearranged themselves. Now they showed futures. Henry saw warehouses sold, contracts dissolved, the house standing empty as then abandoned, no heirs, no legacy, no continuation. The name Ashwood fading from records, not violently, but thoroughly. Martha exhaled slowly. "We would live." "Yes," the voice said, "but without inheritance, without the structure that carried the debt forward." Daniel's jaw clenched. "We'd be nothing." Evelyn shook her head. "We'd be free." Henry closed his eyes. He thought of his father's face, of the begging, of the years he'd stayed because leaving felt like failure. "This house made us important," he said hoarsely, "but it also made us complicit." The blank page on the table pulsed faintly. Waiting. Without warning, the table changed again. The ledgers vanished. The dinner returned, perfectly restored. Steam rose from the food, fresh, untouched. The candles burned steadily. The clock resumed ticking. 11:30. The voice spoke softly now. "One final meal, one final choice." Thomas stared at the food in horror. "You want us to eat?" "No," the voice replied. "I want you to decide." Henry looked at his family, at Daniel, stripped of certainty, at Clara, crushed by truth delayed, at Evelyn, seeing clearly, at Thomas, too young to carry inherited sin, at Martha, who had never asked for any of this. "We end it," Henry said. Martha nodded immediately. "Yes." Clara wiped her tears. "Yes." Daniel hesitated, then nodded once sharply. "Yes." Thomas whispered, "I don't want to live in a house that eats people." Evelyn stepped forward. She placed the iron key on the center of the table. "We refuse the inheritance," she said. "All of it." The house went silent. Then the blank page filled. The voice spoke one last time. "The account is closed." The iron key cracked, split cleanly in two. The heat vanished. The walls exhaled, long and deep. Somewhere above them, wood groaned. not in pain, but in release. The clock chimed. 11:45. 15 minutes remained. Henry felt something lift from his chest that he had carried his entire life without knowing it had weight. Clara laughed softly through tears. Daniel sat down heavily, as if gravity had just returned. Martha closed her eyes. Evelyn smiled, but she didn't relax. "Something remains," she said. The house didn't answer, because this time it couldn't. From deep beneath the dining room, a new sound emerged. Not scraping, not writing, cracking, like wood splitting under pressure. Henry's eyes widened. "The foundation," he whispered. The house had accepted the settlement. But settlements have consequences, and the Ashwoods were about to learn what happens when a system built to endure is told to stop. The cracking sound beneath the dining room didn't grow louder, it multiplied. Not the noise of collapse, but of revision, as if the house were erasing itself one memory at a time. The floor trembled gently, like a living thing adjusting its posture. Dust fell from the chandelier in slow, glittering streams. The candles bent, but did not go out. Henry pressed his palm to the table, steadying himself. "It's not falling," he said, realizing it as he spoke. "It's letting go." Evelyn nodded. "It's forgetting how to hold itself together." Daniel frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "Neither did the bargain," Martha replied. "But here we are." The walls sighed, long, weary exhalations traveling through timber and brick. Doors down the hall opened and closed by themselves, not violently but aimlessly, like thoughts being abandoned mid-sentence. The house was losing its script. Clara gasped suddenly, clutching her head. She stopped, blinked. "I can't remember. The upstairs nursery." Henry stared at her. "What?" "I know it was there," Clara insisted, panicked. "I remember sunlight through lace curtains. But when I try to picture it, there's nothing. Just a blank space." Evelyn's voice was tight. "It's happening faster than I thought." "What's happening?" Thomas asked, fear rising. "The house doesn't just hold debt," Evelyn said. "It holds identity. It remembers who we were for us." Daniel swore under his breath. "You're saying it's rewriting us?" "No," she replied. "It's releasing us, but it doesn't know how to do that gently." Henry felt a sudden hollow ache in his chest. "My father's face," he said slowly. "I can't remember his eyes." Martha reached for him. "Henry, I remember his voice," Henry continued, shaken, "but his face is gone." The price was no longer theoretical. The hallway clock ticked again. 11:50, 10 minutes to midnight. Evelyn looked from face to face, urgency sharpening her calm. "If we stay past midnight, the house will finish forgetting." "What does that mean?" Daniel asked. "It means it won't know how to let go of us," she said. "We'll be incomplete," Clara whispered. "Like ghosts." "Like blanks," Evelyn corrected. "Alive, but erased where we came from." Martha straightened. "Then we leave. Now." Henry hesitated, then nodded. "Take only what you can carry." Thomas bolted toward the stairs. "My coat," Evelyn caught his arm. "Nothing from the house," she said firmly. "Not even objects. They anchor memory." Thomas froze. "Then what do we take?" Evelyn met his eyes. "Each other." As they moved toward the front hall, Daniel faltered. He stopped walking. "Wait," he said. I need a moment." Martha turned. "Daniel!" He rubbed his temples, breathing hard. "Something's wrong." The walls around him rippled faintly, like heat shimmer. Henry stepped toward his son. "What do you feel?" Daniel's voice shook. "I can't remember why the numbers mattered. I know they did. I can't connect them to anything real." Evelyn's face drained of color. "The house is letting go of the version of you it shaped." Daniel's panic spiked. "Then I'm disappearing." "No," Evelyn said quickly. "You're reverting to who you were before it taught you to count people." Daniel grabbed her wrist. "Then help me, please." Evelyn pressed her forehead to his. "Daniel," she said softly, "say something you regret. Say it out loud." He swallowed. "I regret choosing profit over safety." The walls stilled. "Say it again." "I regret treating lives like entries." The shimmer faded. Daniel sagged into Henry's arms, sobbing but present. "That's how we anchor ourselves now," Evelyn said, "with truth, not memory." They reached the front door. The smooth, lockless wood had changed. A seam had appeared. A shape, not a keyhole, a handhold. Martha placed her palm against it. The door responded, not by opening, but by remembering how. The wind outside roared back into existence, cold and sharp and real. Snow rushed in. Night reclaimed its place. Henry pulled his coat tighter, teeth chattering. Evelyn paused at the threshold. She looked back once. The dining room was already fading, not physically, but conceptually, like a thought you're about to lose when you wake up. "Thank you," she whispered, not to the house, but to the moment. Then she stepped outside. They stumbled into the snow, the storm breaking around them like a wall finally breached. Behind them, Ashwood House did not collapse. It dimmed. Windows went dark, one by one. The chimney stopped smoking. The structure remained, but emptied of narrative. A building without a story is just wood. The clock chimed. Midnight. The year turned. Nothing exploded. Nothing screamed. But Henry felt it, an internal shift, subtle and permanent. He could no longer feel the house calling him back. The tether was gone. Clara exhaled shakily. "Is it over?" Evelyn shook her head. "It's finished." Daniel looked at the dark silhouette of the house. "What happens to it?" Evelyn answered quietly. "It will stand until someone tears it down, but it will never ask for anything again." Thomas shivered. "Good." They walked, through snow, toward town, toward uncertainty. Henry realized he could no longer recall the Ashwood family crest, the motto, the stories that once felt foundational, but he could remember his children's voices, Martha's laugh, the warmth of holding Daniel when he broke, the clarity in Evelyn's eyes. The house had taken legacy. It had failed to take love, and that, Henry realized, was the miscalculation. As dawn threatened the horizon, Evelyn slowed. She looked back once more, not at the house, but at the road behind them. "There's one thing left," she said. Henry's chest tightened. "What?" "The settlement ended the system," Evelyn replied, "but someone has to remember why." She met Clara's gaze. "And that memory can't live in a house." Clara swallowed. "I'll write it," she said. Evelyn nodded. "Then the ending will hold." The road away from Ashwood House did not look different. That was the final deception. Snow still covered the fields. The trees still leaned inward, heavy with winter. The sky still carried the dull blue of a year just born. If someone had passed them then, 6 figures moving slowly through the dark, they would have seen nothing unusual. And that was the point. Nothing seemed wrong. They walked in silence at first, not the heavy silence of fear, but the careful silence of people learning how to exist without something that had always pressed against them. Henry felt lighter and heavier at the same time. He could no longer remember the weight of the Ashwood estate ledger books or the pride he once felt walking through those halls. But he could feel the ache in his legs, the cold in his lungs, the presence of his family beside him. Reality had returned. Martha broke the quiet. "We'll reach town by morning," she said. "We'll figure out the rest." Daniel nodded, though his expression remained unsettled. "I don't know who I am without it," he admitted. "Without the name, without the structure, Henry placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Neither did I," he said. "That's why I stayed." Daniel met his father's eyes. "I won't." Henry smiled sadly. "Good." As the sky lightened, Clara began to notice the gaps. "I can't remember the color of my childhood bedroom," she said softly. "I know it mattered once." Evelyn walked beside her unfazed. "The house stored those things for us," she replied. "It kept memory in exchange for obedience." Thomas frowned. "So we'll forget everything?" "No," Evelyn said. "Only what belonged more to the house than to us." Henry realized then that he could no longer picture Ashwood House clearly. Not the floor plan, not the windows, not even the dining room. But he remembered sitting at that table with his children laughing years ago, before the weight of inheritance had taught him to count instead of feel. The house had kept the walls. It failed to keep the moments. They reached the outskirts of town as dawn broke fully. Smoke rose from chimneys, horses stamped in stables, a baker's door opened, releasing warmth and bread scent into the cold air. Life continued, unaware. Henry turned once, looking back toward the hill where Ashwood House stood. From here, it was just another silhouette. No light, no pull, no voice. Daniel followed his gaze. "Do you think anyone will ever know what happened?" Evelyn answered without hesitation. "Only if we choose to tell it." They stopped at the edge of town, resting. Clara pulled a folded notebook from her coat, one she had carried for years without knowing why. "I'll write it," she said again, "not as a warning, not as a confession." Martha looked at her. "Then what?" "As a record," Clara replied, "of how systems built on silence don't collapse loudly, they rot quietly, and how easy it is to mistake survival for innocence." Henry closed his eyes. "That's the truth," he said, "and it deserves daylight." The Ashwood name disappeared within a generation, not dramatically, legally. The estate was sold to the state years later. Surveyors reported structural instability and strange inconsistencies in the interior layout. No buyer wanted it. Eventually, it was left alone. The house did not burn. It did not collapse. It simply stopped mattering. Henry and Martha moved west, taking modest work and living smaller lives that felt unexpectedly full. Daniel abandoned shipping and studied public safety law, dedicating himself to preventing the kinds of acceptable losses he once signed away. Clara's writing was published quietly years later under a different name. Some called it Gothic fiction. Others sensed something truer beneath the prose. Evelyn never wrote. She didn't need to. She carried the memory intact, without the weight. And Thomas grew up believing that homes should never demand loyalty at the expense of truth. Decades later, a man hiking through the Hudson River Valley reported seeing an abandoned house on a hill. No lights, no movement. He said the strangest thing wasn't the silence. It was the absence of feeling. No sadness, he told the local paper. No fear, just emptiness, like a place that forgot why it existed. The reporter didn't print the comment. It sounded too strange. Stories like this are never remembered because of how they begin. They're remembered because of how long they go unnoticed. The Ashwoods weren't evil. They weren't monsters. They were ordinary people living inside an extraordinary system that rewarded silence and punished accountability. And for generations, nothing seemed wrong. Horror does not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it arrives organized, documented, signed and sealed. Sometimes it lives in ledgers instead of basements. And sometimes the bravest thing a family can do is walk away from everything they were told made them matter. If this story unsettled you, that's not an accident. It means you recognize something familiar. If you want more long-form true horror stories where darkness hides behind normality, subscribe to Nothing Seemed Wrong. Because the most disturbing stories don't begin with fear. They begin when nothing seems wrong.